The information and views expressed by our host or guests on the Unlock Potential podcast are their own, and not a substitute for professional medical or fitness advice. Always consult with qualified healthcare or fitness professionals before starting any new exercise program or making changes to your current routine.
You can see what a diverse variety of symptoms, signs, and situations that people come in. And this method helps you tap into each step along the way. What is the first thing I want my body to achieve? What is my body feeling, and how do I execute it each step along the way?
Hello and welcome to Season 2 of Unlock Potential. I'm Brian Delaney. Our focus this season is fitness. I'll be joined by Dr. Duvall, who's going to guide us through his protocol for getting into your best shape so we can live our best lives and serve others well.
Hi, and welcome back to Season 2 of Unlock Potential. I'm your host, Dr. Duvall, and in this season, I'm walking you through all of the steps and stages of the Stay Active method. This is a proven fitness method that takes us through how our body is feeling all the way to executing each particular exercise so that we can be the fittest human we can be so that we are maximally helpful to others. This is episode 20, and we're going to be taking you through a few case studies to show you the variety of clientele that can manage their fitness level and make good long-term development no matter where they're coming from or what they're starting with. I'll take you through 4 different case studies here, and I'll talk a little bit about the seasons of their development, what they found and did the most when they first started, and what their body transitioned to as they made more progress. Our first case study is a male, 60 years old. He was involved in powerlifting when he was younger until hip and back pain started increasing when he was 40 years old. There was some mild tensions that progressively got worse, and then suddenly a very significant injury took him out at 40. When he gave up powerlifting, he felt better for a long period of time, but he also let go of a lot of his fitness level. And so despite feeling better, he's now starting to realize that people are suggesting he might need a hip replacement in the future, and he still wants to be able to play with his grandkids. And so when he comes into the gym and first gets started, he's going to have a lot of stiffness, and he has a lot of soreness in his body. So you remember from the last episode that stiffness and soreness respond best to stamina and flexibility work. And so for most of his early sessions, he's feeling stiffness and he's feeling soreness, but progressively increasing the blood flow and gradually increasing new range of motion, he starts improving the way he moves. Later on, as he's going through the limber test, he starts actually feeling great. And when he's feeling great, he starts to take on strength work. Now, as he takes on that strength work, he feels very invigorated, but he also starts to have memories flash in after the first few weeks where he starts remembering the hip and back pain from 20 years prior. Now, this level of worry directs him back to flexibility work. And so where he first starts, and in those early weeks and months, he's spending a lot of time in stamina and flexibility, he now starts feeling great and then worried, great and then worried. And so that transitions into strength and flexibility work for a while. And if we don't have a system that responds to those changing sensations for him, he's going to get stuck in stamina and flexibility work, but feeling weak, or he's going to drive himself back to the same pain and damage that originally took him out of powerlifting. And so this method worked really well for improving his fitness. He now easily gets up and down off the ground to play with his grandkids and feels stronger and healthier than he ever has. Our second case study is a female, 35 years old. She's spent much of her youth already running and incorporating yoga. And she feels generally fit, lean and healthy, but she's a little bored and is worried that osteoporosis is in her future if she doesn't look to add some muscle. And so when she comes in, she starts with the bored and wanting to add muscle, bored and wanting to push the limits. And so she takes on the daily original workout and strength work regularly for the first few months. And as she makes progress, she starts admitting both to herself and others that the pain of PMS symptoms are coming through each month. And so as she checks into that limber test, she starts noticing that there are times where she feels good and great and really ready to push that strength and daily original workout. But there are also a couple of days of week, a couple of weeks out of the month where she needs to calm herself and ease herself with flexibility work in order to soothe the pain of those symptoms. Now, as she soothes the pain of those symptoms and calms herself with flexibility work, she also improves fluid flow into and out of the pelvis in order to help ease those PMS symptoms in the long run. She also admits that when those PMS symptoms are coming up, she starts feeling sadness with weight gain around her belly. That sadness of weight gain around her belly is what often drove her into running. And when she was in running, she was trying to stay super lean just so that she wasn't as aware of the extra energy that was stored around her belly. But the problem was she was running too intensely for too long a period of time. She was outside the comfort zone for 30, 40, 50 minutes. And remember from our episode on war and famine, that teaches your body that we're retreating, that we're evading, that we are running from the battle and losing the battle. And so when she starts admitting that sadness and transitioning into stamina work, she starts realizing that her stamina work needs to back off in its intensity a little bit. And as the stamina work backs off in the intensity and she moves herself more easily into the comfort zone, she's able to build appropriate stamina instead of retreating level intensity. And that starts to balance out her hormones so she doesn't have as much progression of stress hormone, and she gets a smooth, even layer of energy distribution instead of the focused around the belly layer. So where she came in looking for strength for muscle mass and to alleviate some boredom, she found deeper than that, ignoring pain and excessive stress from her exercise previously, and she was able to smooth out all of those by following the Stay Active method. Our third case study is a male, and he's 45 years old and has 2 young kids. He was a CrossFitter for 5 years, had a great time, got back to being capable of doing pull-ups, found some youth and some vitality back in his life by really challenging himself, remembered his old days of playing sports and was really starting to feel good. But after about 5 years, he started to develop a shoulder injury, and that shoulder injury made pull-ups and Olympic weightlifting snatches painful for him. Nothing acute ever happened, but it was this low-grade chronic thing that gradually got a little worse and a little worse. Now, a couple of times it got bad enough that he stopped CrossFitting and went through a cycle of physical therapy. And in the cycle of physical therapy, they found some weakness and imbalance around his rotator cuff musculature, and they really focused in on getting that shoulder joint optimally aligned at as often as they could. And then he would go back to CrossFit and again would go through that same situation. And so 5 years until a shoulder injury, and then 3 different cycles with PT, which offered temporary improvement. And so he felt caught between feeling as vital as he did as a CrossFitter and making his shoulder symptoms worse and worse. And so he never quite found that balance because doing the CrossFit was overall picture, not specific to him, and the PT was super focused on the shoulder, but not focused on the rest of his physiology. As he came in and went through the limber test and started doing some exercise, we found that he had structurally functional imbalances in his strength. And by that I mean his ability to do pull-ups and to put weights all the way overhead was really high compared to his ability to squat, to kneel down, and to sit down with weights. And so that imbalance meant that everything he was doing in the CrossFit class was overusing the shoulder. And so his shoulder was overused and gradually trying to let him know that it was hurting. Now, if we didn't ever change his dosage of exercise, we would never increase the balance in that functional, structural situation. And so his ability to squat was low. His ability to kneel down with weight was low. His ability to sit down with weight was low compared to the pulling. And so we were able to change that dosage, give him more of those exercises he was relatively weaker at. And over time, that meant his body was using more of it on a regular basis instead of just overusing that shoulder. Now, we also found that his stamina work, he was not staying within the comfort zone. The intensity of CrossFit classes for progressively longer durations often led him to be outside his comfort zone for a really long period of time. Now, he built a great level of fitness with this, but what happens is you start breathing quicker and exhaling more. And as you're breathing quicker and exhaling more, that starts to change the structure of your rib cage. It becomes more depressed and more pressed down and more contracted. The shoulder blade sits on the rib cage. And as the shoulder blade sits on the rib cage, the shoulder blade is what positions the shoulder joint and the rotator cuff. And so if the rib cage is off, the shoulder blade gets off. And if the shoulder blade is off, the rotator cuff muscles have to try to make up for it. And when they can't make up for it anymore, they start sending pain signals and we start damaging the shoulder joint itself. And while he was going through classes, not focused as much on his lower body strength work, he was also exhausting his rib cage and increasing and exacerbating those symptoms. And so when we had him start going through stamina work and teaching him to stay within the comfort zone, he was less contracted, less exhausted, less depressed in his rib cage, and his body started to revert that process because it wanted more oxygen coming in. It wanted more air coming in. He was comfortable and able to maintain that broader, more open posture without paying as much attention to it. He focused on staying in the comfort zone and moving steadily. His rib cage readjusted appropriately. His shoulder blade starts sitting in a different place on the rib cage, and the rotator cuff didn't have to work as hard. Now, as he went through that, started to improve the relatively weaker areas and started to change his posture subconsciously because his body just altered the rib cage position, he started feeling more peaceful. And when he started feeling more peaceful, he felt inspired to get back into the daily original workout. The variety and the athleticism that originally drew him to CrossFit was now accessible. But because his body was in a different place, he was much more capable of doing it without having to focus and adjust around that shoulder pain all of the time.
Check out the official Unlock Potential store where inspiration meets style. Explore our exclusive collection of gear inspired by the transformational messages straight from our Unlock Potential podcast. From trendy apparel that embraces the power of positivity to accessories that fuel your motivation. We've got something for every go-getter. Spread the messages of empowerment, energy, and motivation that you get from the Unlock Potential podcast by grabbing your gear today.
Now, our fourth example is quite an extreme one. There's a male at 30 years old. He had exercise-induced asthma when he was young that he had grown out of for a while and then had cycled back. He had a spinal injury from engaging in a water sport when he was young as well. He suspects that there's a spinal fracture, but never actually got x-rays done. Just has a lot of stiffness around that lower spine. He tore a ligament and cartilage in his knee playing high school basketball and had 3 surgeries from it. He separated both of his collarbones in a soccer game as a goalie in high school. Now, a separation of the collarbone means the collarbone attaches to the shoulder blade and it separated from that joint. And it leaves a large, what's known as step defect, a big gap in the end of the collarbone right there. In college, he ended up as a pre-diabetic due to excessive alcohol intake and relatively less and less activity and exercise. Then in graduate school, he herniated a disc in his neck, performing a lateral raise. And so he was doing an exercise focused on one particular part of the shoulder itself, but his spine was not strong enough to stabilize that, and he ended up rupturing a disc in his neck. That led to weakness and numbness down his arm for about a 6-week period. He also dislocated his right shoulder body surfing in the ocean after a hurricane. So one particular wave slammed him into the beach and popped his shoulder out. The second wave tumbled him over and popped it right back in. Now, after this point, he decided, boy, I really want to get fit and healthy, and I've heard about CrossFit. Around that phase back in college when he was pre-diabetic, he realized that he was headed down a very unhealthy way, and so had started adjusting his exercise. And he had taken on bodybuilding style workouts, but that was when he started feeling the herniation of the disc in his neck and had a lot of imbalances that left him susceptible to that dislocated shoulder. And he heard about CrossFit in its whole body style exercise, and he felt inspired by it. But shortly after doing those exercises and those workouts, the intensity of them left him with trouble breathing. Not during the workout, but 20, 30, 40, 60 minutes after the workout, he would have some difficulty carrying on a conversation. He kept at it though because he thought, no pain, no gain. This CrossFit stuff has worked for other people and it's going to work for him. Well, that trouble breathing started to turn into trouble breathing at night as well, and eventually led to a couple of bouts of walking pneumonia. And walking pneumonia is a buildup of fluid in the lungs that prevents you from getting a full, healthy breath, but it doesn't make you bedridden. You still move throughout the day and function. Well, this was treated with asthma medication. And so asthma medication started to help revert that walking pneumonia. And over time, he was able to breathe and function. And he did a lot of CrossFit and got progressively fitter over a few years. But during that same time period, he was gaining belly fat. He was gaining extra energy stored around his torso, despite following good nutrition plans based on whole foods with lots of vegetables, reducing processed foods, and excellent exercise plans. So not just CrossFit randomly assigned, but hiring coaches to give him specific preordained exercise plans. And as he went through that, he just didn't understand why he had to have progressively more asthma medication and was progressively gaining energy storage around the trunk as compared to his arms and legs. Well, at 30 years old, that was actually me. I have gone through all of these injuries and illnesses and have remained dedicated to building the level of fitness that makes me most capable of others, most capable of helping others. And so at 30 years old, I decided, boy, we really need to change what's happening in this CrossFit fitness exercise dosage space. And so for the last 11 years, I've been building this Stay Active method, bumping into all of these old injuries and illnesses in myself and helping guide others as well to build the right guardrails, the right mindset, and the right dosage to physical fitness. Now, the peak of my belly fat around the trunk, I have gained and lost almost 40 pounds. 40 pounds of total body weight, and a majority of it in inflammation and body fat around my trunk. I'm currently weighing about 170, but I've weighed as much as 218 pounds. Now, at 218 pounds, I was stronger and capable of moving heavier weights, but I also had a lot of inflammation and a large dosage of asthma medication. And as I've gone through this journey of checking in on my appetite and eating what I'm hungry for and when I'm hungry for it, as I've gone in on increasing the amount of stamina work that I'm doing, but backing off of the intensity, and in waiting to take on my strength work until those days that I feel great, until those days that I'm really ready to push the limits. Then as I've done that, my body weight has come down a bit, but it's been body fat around the trunk and levels of inflammation and tissue damage that had just never gone through the repair process. And today, despite weighing less, I am capable of lifting in some ways almost as much, and in other ways matching the same amount of weight that I was doing at 45 pounds heavier. You can see what a diverse variety of symptoms, signs, and situations that people come in. And this method helps you tap into each step along the way. What is the first thing I want my body to achieve? What is my body feeling, and how do I execute it each step along the way? I hope these case studies are helpful at helping you understand what is possible with the Stay Active method. By going through the Limber test, getting the signals from the tissues of what is great and ready to go, what is tired and needs to rest, what is damaged and going through the healing process, what is stiff and protecting the tired and damaged areas. And all of those signals going through your memory and emotional center, either turning the volume up or turning the volume down, and then you becoming aware of what main symptom you have right then, is going to guide you towards peeling back each layer of fitness that was developed in an unhealthy way and exposing and releasing the fitness that is super helpful to others. I really appreciate you joining us on this journey. You can tune in to our Patreon episodes, which go in through deeper dives with Brian and I talking about all the possibilities and any extra questions he's had on each of the topics that I brought up today. I really appreciate you coming along for this journey. Like, follow, and subscribe on each of the social media, and we'll go ahead and see you next week.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of Unlock Potential. For exclusive content, make sure to subscribe to our Patreon. Follow us across all socials at @TheBrianDelaney and visit our website at thebriandelaney.com to shop our gear and see what's coming up next.